Welcome to Your Health is Wealth podcast. The podcast invites you to embrace the profound truth that your health is your wealth. I'm your host, Kristen Burke. This podcast aims to take you on a journey into the landscape of alternative medicine, integrative practices, and holistic healing options that empower you to thrive in mind, body, and spirit. Today in our segment titled Episode 12, The Inflammation Connection, a Tech Founder's Journey from Chronic Illness to Healing. Today, I'm sitting down with an entrepreneur who took her biggest personal crisis and turned it into her life's work. Our guest today, Diana Bitting, a Bay Area marketing leader and product builder who spent over a decade in high-growth, venture-backed startups. Diana's story takes a left turn when her chronic health issues, such as inflammation, insomnia, and digestive problems, begin to hijack her life. What started as manageable stress spiraled into a health crisis in which conventional medicine was not able to address. Today, Diana is a co-founder of Catbird, a digital wellness concierge that flipped the script on how we can approach trauma and stress-related health conditions. Her journey from burned-out startup executive to a bhakti yoga instructor and wellness entrepreneur involved therapeutic psychedelics, somatic therapy, and completely reimagining what healing could actually look like. This isn't your typical wellness transformation story. This is about connecting the dots between childhood trauma and adult chronic illness, about what happens when you hit rock bottom with your health, and about building real solutions for problems that are quietly destroying millions of people. Welcome, Diana. Thank you so much for joining me today. I know you're busy. I'm really excited to chat with you about your story.
I am honored to be here, and it's a beautiful place to be where you're on the other side of your healing journey, at least those big inflection points where you were in acute states of distress, and being able to be of service and share your story and help to heal other people. So I am very honored to be here today with you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Let's just dive right in. So people understand where you're coming from. Do you mind sharing a little bit of your professional background? Where did you grow up? What did you study when you were in college? And essentially, what got you into the startup world? I know that's a compound question. Sorry.
Okay.
Start off with just giving your general background, what got you here.
Sure. So there's the personal and the professional. I'll probably just marry the two. I was born in Iowa City, Iowa, and we only lived there for about 6 months. I'll go into a little bit more of my family life and my childhood later on, but my dad was studying to be a surgeon there, and we moved around quite a bit before settling in the Midwest. So I'm a Midwesterner at heart, and went to undergrad at Indiana University. It's interesting because all I wanted to do was get out of the Midwest and explore this big world out there, but they had the #1 music program at the time, and at that point, I thought I wanted to be an opera singer. I ended up going to Indiana University and had a wonderful time, made some really dear friends, and then moved to Chicago. And turned out that opera singing and that life was not for me. I had double majored in journalism and media as well. So I went to join a marketing agency and worked in marketing and brand strategy for actually the majority of my career. And that kind of evolved into business development later on, and as my professional life kind of evolved. But yeah, a lot of marketing executive positions at high growth, venture-backed startups, really high pressure environments, very anxiety producing environments, lots of pressure from stakeholders. And I am glad to be out of that world now. I'll say that.
You're out of that world in one sense, but you've transitioned into your own startup now.
Yes. Yes.
You've spent over a decade with the high growth venture-backed startups. And you gave us some insights as to the roles that you played. You were in marketing. And so with that causing stress, how did that affect you personally? try to
Yes,
balance both of the two, balance your professional and personal life.
sure. It was a really unhealthy environment. I'll say that much. And a lot of people are suffering right now as we speak. And so many people aren't even aware that they're currently operating in a state of chronic stress. And that to me is disheartening, but it's also a huge opportunity for us to just get smarter about these things. It's interesting because, yes, to your point, now I have my own startup and that can be stress inducing. But now that I have the tools, now that I know how to regulate my nervous system, now that I know how to come back to homeostasis and I have the right medicines in my medicine cabinet, it doesn't feel like a stressful environment, which is really great. And it also helps that I love what I do and I'm really passionate about what I do. So, yes, one day when we are high growth, venture backed tech company, essentially, I can rely on those tools and all the work that I've done to help me stay sane in this very chaotic world that I'm engaging with.
I bet it's just something that just pops into my head. I have the analogy of an athlete. When we're working in high performance or high pressure type of environments, the best way that we're going to perform is when our mind is clear. That's why a lot of athletes go to psychologists, like sports psychologists, and they give them tools to clear their mind and not be in their mind. You would think with these high level venture backed startups that they would want this company be sustainable, where there's not a burnout, where they're able to attain a very stable type of connectivity with their staff and not a turnover.
Yes.
You,
Yes.
you would think that these bright minds, especially coming out of the Silicon Valley, they would have figured out a secret sauce to apply that same psychology that they do for high performing athletes to their high performing staff members, especially in the marketing area. That's really a key position for a go-to-market strategy and marketing for companies on how they're seen and how they're able to bring in their customers.
Yes.
So,
And there's been a little bit of movement. There's been this big push of around EQ and emotional intelligence and getting a better handle. And I think things are getting better for sure. There's a hypervigilance and there's an overwork and there's all of these things that are really good for hitting certain success metrics with a company and growing at an incredibly rapid rate when that's due to all the pressure that comes with getting checks from institutional funds. Again, pros and cons. And I hope that shifts because people are getting really sick. So it's this idea of short-term pain for long-term gains. How are we truly creating sustainable businesses and lowering attrition and turnover rate with our staff and really helping to support people? And also lowering costs around chronic disease, right? If you're in a chronic stress response for too long, then you get really sick and there's a loss of productivity. But people aren't thinking about these things this way. I know that there's a paradigm shift happening, and I'm really excited about the science that's coming out around the mind-body connection and the implications of being in a chronic stress state. But I have yet to see insurers and employers enact and start to implement programs that are more preventative. But we'll see.
that absolutely makes sense. And this is pretty cool because I think that topic could actually be another episode.
Agree.
Who knows? Maybe we get together and bring a couple of other guests that might be in a different spot where maybe they were in that seat of working in marketing or a CEO and now they're investors. And maybe
Yes.
you want to make those changes. And the only way those changes can be made is when people have experienced that pain, whether it's in the workplace or personal life. And now that catalyzes change.
Yes.
But
Yes.
lead in to the next question I have for you. So you spent all those years in the startup world. When did you first start noticing the impact on your own health?
Oh, man.
Certain symptoms? Was it like a switch went off? Was it a gradual thing? If you were able to go back and reanalyze how it unfolded.
Sure. What's interesting about this question is the way that my body responded and my mind responded to the impact of this stress was very much a result of all of my childhood and early adult trauma. It's not like this kind of happened in a vacuum, if you will, and it was all just caused by this environment that I was in, this startup environment I was in that was high pressure and high stakes. It was very much almost a culmination of all of the pain and compartmentalization and untreated traumas of previous phases of my life that kind of came to a head, if you will. So it just exacerbated things that were already there. My body absolutely broke down. And this is what happens, right? Your body sends you signals, and oftentimes we power through them and we ignore them. But your body keeps the score, and ultimately the truth will prevail. And two things broke the camel's back. It was the global pandemic, which left me home with 2 children under the age of 5 that I was homeschooling with a really high stress, high pressure job in venture capital, and then a really dramatic divorce. It was those 2 things. So a restructuring of my family and then a global pandemic. And that was the straw that broke the camel's back, if you will, where I found myself in the back of an ambulance on my way to the ER after a really dramatic fainting spell in my kitchen after years of suffering from debilitating inflammatory issues and insomnia and chronic anxiety. And that was my body waving the white flag and saying, yep, nope, we're not doing this anymore, actually. So I would never take a day off of work, even if I was really sick. And I called in to work, or I emailed my boss and I said, I'm in the ER. I'm going to take a day off and I need to figure out what's going on. That's interesting because that was the awakening for me on a physical level. And we can get into this a little bit later. But there was also an awakening that happened on a spiritual level and a psychological level along the way as well. So it happened in succession.
We don't talk about the spiritual connection with health and in our body because it's mind, body, and soul. So the psychological, the physiological, and the spiritual, they all do go hand in hand. And especially with medical system that we have right now, we don't really get into the spiritual. I think they are starting to talk about it, but I don't know that's really integrated yet.
Yeah.
If we're treating the physiological, usually that's surface layer. It's not necessarily determining what is actually causing these issues to begin with. Our bodies are meant to share with us what's going wrong, right? Where the imbalances are occurring. And if we're listening, if we're paying attention, it'll show up as a headache, as lack of sleep, as digestive issues, as inflammation, as dizziness. Those are symptoms or signs, rather, that our body's telling us to say, hey, quit doing that thing. There might be multiple things that are going on. And at least I'll speak for myself. You can let me know if this is you too. Is I was just trained to buck up, buttercup, and just keep going, kind of avoiding paying attention to some of those things. What about you? How you were raised?
Yes, absolutely. So I'm the daughter of a military man and a huge, really strong military legacy in my family. So much trauma in my family, alcoholism, active duty, lots of military violence, Vietnam War stories, and lots of mental health, schizophrenia, so much ancestral trauma that we now know because of the study of epigenetics played a part in my DNA and how my genes are expressing and how I came into this world. So I just wanted to call that out. And then from there, having a childhood that I joke was similar to the Von Trapp family and The Sound of Music, where it was militaristic. It was very performance focused. It was a lot of conditioning around hypervigilance and perfection and lots of criticism. And my parents were absolutely doing the best that they could because they were raised in a high trauma environment, and they were conditioned in certain ways, and they were in pain, and they hadn't done the work yet around all of that. It's interesting. I was reflecting on this morning, but as a young child, and I'm sure that there are articles written about this that I've yet to stumble across, but you deify and idolize your parents. This is natural. And to me, my parents were God. And I was raised in a really strict Roman Catholic household. It was very dogmatic. It was laden with shame and rules and a lot of imbalanced gender roles and things like that. And that did a lot of damage to me, not only having this idea of a very punitive masculine God, which was then reinforced by my own father figure and my mother as well, and struggling with the fact that they weren't able to model to me true love, unconditional love, which, by the way, I now know is God. I call it perfect love, but they weren't able to model that to me, and that's okay. I still love them dearly. If you don't love yourself first, authentically, how can you possibly love another human being? And that was a big part of my healing process, as well as remothering myself and learning to love myself authentically first. And there wasn't any room for emotions. There wasn't any room for imperfection. There wasn't any room for being your authentic self, frankly. Like, my parents had a plan for us and we were just following along. We were their plan. And I lost myself in the process. And I think, honestly, the combination of lack of authentic love and feeling God forsaken in that, if my parents don't love me, then God doesn't love me and I'm not lovable, coupled with I'm actually living a life that's not mine. I'm living a life that someone else wants me to live. That was the beginning of the imbalances. That was the beginning of the blockages of energy. That was the beginning of what would later express itself as really serious physical and mental health symptoms. That was the beginning. And I'm a mother now and I struggle with this. Parenting is really hard. I think there's something about being a parent where the narcissism in you comes out. Like, we're all on the spectrum. It's just how much. And it's, no, I want you to perform. I want you to do well in school or do this thing. And I think there are people that can hold that in a way of with true love and not making it a reflection on them and how great of a parent they are. But I struggle with that sometimes where I'm like, nope, I got to let go and just let my kids be who they are without all this pressure. So I'm just flagging that as a way to give grace to any parent on this call, because I think now more than ever, there's so much pressure to like not do anything that traumatizes our kids. And they're now saying that's leading to a huge decrease in household size and the decisions around people having kids. And I don't think there's there's no perfect parent. So I think it's more the awareness that's important. We're aware of these wounds that were inflicted on us. And now we're also aware of how we're parenting our children. And I think that we can give ourselves a lot of grace around that.
You said something about it's that tightrope sometimes as a parent, and we tend to emulate some of the aspects that we learn from our parents or role models in our lives. And we think that if we set strict ground rules, expectations on our children, we need to give you these rules to guide you so you can be the best person you can on the planet, right? For yourself, right? As a human, as a person going to work, whatever it is that you're applying yourself in life. And there's a balance with that. I think where you're going with that was ego versus connection within our own wholeness. We need ego. Ego protects us, right? But it's how far it goes versus being connected in wholeness. So when we truly surrender, we're mitigating the ego, right? So I was having a conversation just yesterday, actually, at a friend's house, and we were talking about surrendering, like sometimes challenges that come into life and we don't have control over certain decisions that can impact our own sphere, whether it's your business, your personal life. And we were saying, okay, make sure you surrender okay, I'm going to put that at the top of my to-do list. I'm going to surrender, which obviously some level of trying to take control even over that.
Yes.
You hit the nail on the head with awareness. So being aware is key because now you can see where the ego is seeping in versus being connected to self. When we have these trials in life where we don't feel like we're loved or good enough to be loved, that is a mirror of our own energy coming back to us.
Mm.
And it starts with us, right? When we embody that as individuals, and this goes in anything in life, leadership, work, corporations, doesn't matter. When we start individually with ourselves with grounding and wholeness and we feel bliss, we love ourselves, that energy goes out to other people and they feel that. And when it doesn't come back that way, you're like, oh, maybe there's something within self that is unintentionally going out to that person. It may not even be a thought. It might just be a gesture, body language or something. And that just extends out to our leaders, management in a company, politicians. They are mirroring the consciousness of the collective. A lot of the times I hear people say, I'm not saying you're saying this, but this jogged a memory of people saying there's a lot of duality going on in the world right now with look at those people, they're bad, or look at the other side, they're bad. They're only mirroring the collective.
Yes, I believe that.
Going back, you started talking about your medical journey with it starting in an ambulance, and you took that day. From that point, do you feel comfortable walking us through some of the types of symptoms you were experiencing or the specific health issues that you want to share?
Sure. Yeah. And I'll back up just a little bit because the physical symptoms start much earlier. So I started having panic attacks in my mid-20s, and that was a result of another traumatic event that happened to me when I was 25. I was the victim. I'm a statistic. 1 in 5 women have been the victim of sexual assault. And I had completely compartmentalized that experience, and I hadn't properly addressed it, really. But it lives inside of you, right? Trauma is stored on a cellular level, and we know that now. So it was just a matter of time. And yeah, I started to experience panic attacks. And at that point, I was just getting into what would become a really unhealthy relationship dynamic, really unhealthy. And I am just a textbook Freudian archetype in the sense that I had a certain type of father and I married that man as well. And it was a very unhealthy dynamic for me. The insomnia started to increase in severity for sure. And I was trying to treat these panic attacks by doing what the average American suffering from some kind of mental health crisis does. We have 2 solutions that we're aware of, at least at that point in time, because there's so much conditioning around utilizing the conventional medical and psychiatric model. And I did what, again, most people do. I made an appointment with a psychiatrist. I spent, no joke, 15 minutes reading out on my symptoms. And the next thing I knew, I had a script for a psychiatric drug, an SSRI that I was put on. And I ended up going on and off of SSRIs for about 10 years. I really hated the side effects, And I also think deep down, even though my dad is a doctor and I was deeply conditioned to trust conventional medicine, I still knew deep down that it wasn't actually helping me at all. And I just felt really numb. The insomnia was bubbling up. The chronic anxiety was bubbling up. I can't stress enough, just looking back, what that anxiety looked like and how that was showing up in my life. Little things like I would be in line at Starbucks and this was back when I drank Starbucks and so much caffeine, which, by the way, absolutely exacerbates anxiety. And I'm now caffeine free and loving it. And we don't talk about that enough because caffeine is a drug as well. But I would be in line and I would be anxiety ridden because the line wasn't moving. I would be stuck. And every aspect of my life I tried to control. So even if I wasn't going to be late for work, the idea that I might be late for work or 1 minute late for work because I'm getting this coffee and the line isn't moving. And that was every single part of my life. I never sat down. I certainly couldn't sit quietly in a room by myself. I was numbing with everything possible: alcohol, exercise addiction. I would go through bouts of overeating, eating too much sugar. I'd struggled earlier in my life, actually really young, way too young for a girl, with bulimia and anorexia and exercise addiction, just trying to numb. I honestly think it was trying to numb this toxic poison that I knew was in my body that was oftentimes rearing its head to me in different ways. And so in addition to the insomnia and the anxiety, I started having these digestive issues that just continued to get worse and worse. And a lot of people don't talk about this. There's so much stigma around these digestive disorders, mainly because it's really embarrassing. IBS, IBD, diverticulitis, all of these things, Crohn's, all of these things, again, that landed me in and out of the doctor's office. So much blood work, so many lab tests, so many different medications that I tried, supplements, all of these things. Nothing worked. Nothing worked. I will say that there was a little bit of a placebo effect at times where I start a new supplement and then I would feel like I would get better. But guess what? Then something stressful would happen and I was just back at square one. So I was really suffering. And when COVID hit, it just, the straw broke and the panic attacks returned. And that's when everything came to a head. And from there, it was actually really beautiful because oftentimes through sickness, we find health, right? And sickness is a portal that allows us to seek true wellness, perhaps for the first time in our life. And I'm at a point now where I'm so grateful for everything that I went through, all the suffering that I went through. I also had a really acute, painful abdominal issue that would come and go as well. And no doctor could figure this out, Kristen. No doctor. It was crazy. I would list all my symptoms. And I'll never forget being in a virtual, like a telemedicine meeting with my physician at the top rated hospital in California and the top 3 hospital group in all of the United States. And I was reading out on all of my symptoms, and there were no questions about trauma and stress level. And it wasn't until I started working with an acupuncturist at the encouragement of one of my friends who finally asked me, how stressed out would you say you are at a scale of 1 to 5? And this is also really important. I answered 3 because I had been in a toxic stress response for so long that I had no idea what normal felt like. Looking back, I was on the brink of complete collapse. I was out of my mind with anxiety and chronic stress. And yet I was unaware of that because that's all I knew. And so those self-assessment tools can be really problematic for people that they're just not aware of a healthy baseline because they've always been dysregulated. Their nervous system has always been, for as long as they can remember, out of whack. And there's so much more to say, but I'll stop there and we can decide where to go next.
First of all, thank you for sharing all of that. And my heart goes to you with what you had to experience with sexual assault. And it is more common than people think, whether it's childhood or teenage years or a woman in her 20s. There's a vulnerability. It happens to men also, but I would say it's a higher likelihood with women And there's a vulnerability aspect involved with that we're naturally nurturing beings. And, there is a vulnerability with that being taken over. And so I'm sorry that you had to go through that. It's not acceptable.
Thank you. Yeah.
Lots of stuff here that I'd love to unpack with you. And the first thing I want to talk about is what you just mentioned with the subjective. I'm going to highlight that range of how do you feel today, or how's your pain level, which we know why that one. And there's a previous podcast I had where a doctor said, ER doctor talked about the subjective range with pain so they could justify the opioid medication being prescribed.
Yep.
But with this, how's your stress today, like compared to what? To your point, because if you've been in that state most of your life, that particular day, you may feel great in comparison to that baseline for you. What is normal, right? What should be considered normal for an individual with their nervous system? And so I agree with you. I think that's a poor way of trying to evaluate somebody. I think more specific questions seem to be more appropriate for something like that, for a trained person in the mental health area to understand the impact. Or perhaps, here you go, someone in the mental health area and someone in the medical field or holistic space that's trained to understand how this can affect the physiology, the mind, and the soul. Perhaps you have a tool that might, or maybe something could come out of this conversation where there could be an epiphany. That might be something. We know there's a gap, right, in the medical system. You talked about within 15 minutes, you were prescribed an SSRI, for example. It seemed like you were alluding to multiple prescriptions. And just so for folks that are out there that don't know what an SSRI is, it's a serotonin reuptake inhibitor. It's a type of antidepressant that is one of the top prescribed medications that people are given. I think there's been a lot of controversy around SSRIs, mainly because it's been linked to suicide, been linked to potentially school shootings. There's a lot of statistics around some of the side effects that it can cause. So I guess I'm just curious, when you were prescribed that for the first time, did your medical doctor warn you as to some of the side effects you may experience?
I will say honestly that I don't recall, but I'm sure that it's part of their protocol to read out on that. And I'll also say that I don't want to vilify these doctors and these physicians and these people that have dedicated their lives to getting people well. They're just products of the system, and the system is really flawed.
Yeah.
So I think that most of them are doing the best that they can with the tools at their disposal. And we could talk about this company that I built as the result of my healing journey in a bit, but our chief medical officer, Dr. Jessica Desjarnette, who is a wealth of information and a trauma-informed MD, she always talks about the academic institutions as being complicit, and the fact that the curriculum at these institutions it's hyper-focused on this idea of mechanistic reductionism and looking at symptoms in a silo and looking at pharmaceutical and surgical interventions, those two options, drugs or surgery to heal/mitigate whatever the symptom is. And 40% of her education was focused on pharmacology. So just the study of drugs. They're not taught mind-body medicine. They're not taught about spiritual health. They're not even taught about nutrition and the link to food and mental health. And these are the people that we have given our power to, given over our health trajectory to, with pretty much full trust, unwarranted trust, I will say. But they're not evil. They're just a product of the system, as I'm sure when you've shared this sentiment with me previously, right? It's a collective. It's the result of the collective. The side effects of the meds were pretty obvious to me. And people also don't talk as much about the sexual side effects. You're not, let's just say this, you're not just numbing your brain. Everything goes numb. You actually just can't engage with life at all at full capacity. I do think there's an opportunity for it to be a stopgap solution for people that are really struggling with suicidality and things like that. But yeah, all the science now, all the research now, to your point, is coming out about how long term it actually leads to higher suicide rates, which is really problematic. And that's why I get really excited about the potential with psychedelics, which we can talk about later on. But I am just really hoping that some administration here in the future looks at these medicines that are coming from the earth, that are coming, I believe, from God, and looking at the efficacy and the hard data around that and opening them up to people and making them affordable, if not free, because, oh, by the way, most of them are plants. So I am hopeful, and I will always remain hopeful that we'll get to a better place.
Yeah, and I certainly didn't want to give the feeling that I'm saying all doctors are doing the wrong thing, because I think they are absolutely doing what they were trained to do. To your point, they do have the ability to use discernment. Obviously, just like in any field, there's going to be different perspectives and opinions on how to use medication. Medications, when I was trained many years ago in toxicology, like in the 90s, I was trained that the intent was not to be used for long term. What does that mean? It means short term, days, weeks, maybe months. There could be some exceptions to those, right? And really, they're used to stabilize an individual until they can transition into a better path. But we're not seeing that now. We're seeing lifelong use, not one med, multiple. And you said something so key. You're not just numbing your brain, you're numbing your life. Your brain affects every aspect of your body. And if you can't feel it, how do you heal it? Your body, the pain that you feel, the discomfort that your body speaks to you, or when you feel good, right? When you feel vivacious and balanced, your body's always speaking to you and telling you, okay, stay on this path, or you need to make some changes with your food, or maybe drink some more water or get some more sleep, whatever it is, right? Reduce the stress. If we're numbing that, then we're bypassing the ability to make that adjustment. Our body, our mind, our soul, every aspect of ourself, we're bypassing. So when we're taking an exam, I'm just going to use this as an analogy. You're in college. You're not going to skip till the very end and read the summary and you could try to take your final exam, right? You start as building blocks. You're going to learn the beginning, the middle, and the end. And then you're hopefully going to be able to connect the dots and be able to take that final exam for your course. Our bodies, we need to be able to feel all of those aspects to make those adjustments. We're bypassing, we're missing a big picture. That might be, and I don't know this for fact, but I'm now just reflecting, could that be why our chronic illnesses are skyrocketing? Because we're bypassing that. We're delaying the reflection of, hey, we've got this inflammation in the gut. Now it's led to this and this. Instead of catching it early where we could probably quickly, easily reverse it, now we've got to go to other multiple more complicated steps to do that. Thank you for sharing your experience with the SSRI or any of the other medications. And to your point also with the caffeine, it's a pathomimetic amine. It is a stimulant, it is a drug, and it absolutely can have negative side effects that it can affect your behavior, your focus. It can exacerbate stress and all of that too. Thank you for sharing that. Sure. You mentioned that when you went to the doctor, high top level medical system, that they didn't have a simple question of related to stress or trauma and how that could be an issue. I would guess that they probably didn't have any questions about your digestive aspects, your sleep, or the type of food you're eating too, your daily routine. Did they ask you lifestyle questions or anything like that?
Maybe a few, but I remember it was hyper focused on symptoms. And then what she did was she wanted to write me scripts. She wanted to write me prescription for drugs. And she basically also warned me that if I remain on this trajectory, that I might have to have surgery. Like it can turn into full-blown diverticulitis and all kinds of issues. And that was also a big wake-up call. But also one of two paths. You're either going to get surgery and or take these drugs. And these are the tools that I have at my disposal. So in her defense, there was this toss-away comment that she made at the end. Because again, I can tell she's a good one. She's a good one. She's just ill-informed. She said there's a support group. Let me back up. The most important thing that she said actually was, because I pushed back on the drugs and the surgery. I was like, actually, I'm exploring like a naturopathic approach. I'm interested in this. This was at the very beginning of my healing journey, right? Where I was just starting to wake up to the fact that, oh, I'm actually not going to heal in my doctor's office. Okay, so now what? And she said, okay, I've given you these options. You've said no. I actually don't know how to help you. There's actually nothing else that I can do to help you at this point. And then she proceeded to say, but there's a support group that you can join if you want for people with inflammatory disorders like yours. And it's free and maybe you can tune it. And it's interesting because I ended up taking her advice and just going on this forum. And I just love the way that the healing journey works because it's so divinely orchestrated and divinely designed, because it's all these little nudges that came my way, these little cracks in the door that came my way throughout my entire story that helped me move in the right direction. And I went on this forum, and the first article that appeared, or the first resource that appeared, was the link between trauma and IBS. This had never been on my radar before, ever been on my radar before. And I remember it reminded me of this conversation that I had with another friend of mine that was studying naturopathic medicine. And I was just catching up with her and I was like, yeah, I'm dealing with this digestive thing. And she said, do you have trauma? And I love this person. This is one of my soul sisters. Her name's Megan Taylor. She's actually a really successful global DJ. And she's a light worker. And I love her. Megan, if you're listening, thank you so much for being in my life. But she was the first one that said, do you have trauma? Because I was describing all my symptoms. And I was like, yeah, I definitely do. My childhood was messed up. This thing happened to me when I was 25. And she stopped me and she was like, no, stop. You have to heal your trauma. So and then I didn't do anything with that. I was like, yeah, okay, that's a big question mark. Like, how do you heal your trauma? And we'll get to that because there is a way. But then fast forward to me stumbling across this resource, which again hit me over the head of trauma and digestion. And I think what's really interesting is when you start to engage with the resources that are out there online, the influencers that are out there online, there are people with huge TikTok accounts and huge Instagram accounts, millions of followers that hyper focus on food as the cure for a lot of these digestive issues. And I'm not saying that doesn't play a role. It absolutely plays a role. We know that now, but it's only one part of the equation. If you apply first principles thinking and you continue to ask why, you might get, not for everyone, but you might get to the answer of, I actually feel deeply unsafe in my body. There were certain things that happened to me over time, and it doesn't have to be childhood trauma. If you lived through a global pandemic, you absorbed all of this stress from the media. It was inescapable. And that lives and is stored in your nervous system. And so for the majority of these people, if you keep asking why and you get curious around it, it might lead to the conclusion of, again, I don't feel safe in my body. And for me, I didn't even know what nervous system regulation meant. What I felt constantly was the sensation of butterflies in my stomach. which you're taught to associate with love, true love. Oh, you feel nervous around this person. They're now saying that's actually a bad sign. You should feel really calm. You should feel deeply calm around your person. But that, again, that's all I knew. All I knew my whole life was butterflies in my stomach. I didn't have a safe household to come home to. I didn't have safe parents to come home to. I didn't have a safe partner to come home to. I was always in a state of dysregulation. And that's when I started getting curious around the link between trauma and my digestive disorder. And whenever I get curious about something, Kristen, I go deep on it. And for the next 12 months of my life, no joke, it was a little maniacal, I admit, I went down the rabbit hole on the science and the biology and the physiology and the neurology and the psychology of trauma and its multidisciplinary, its effects on every single aspect of our health. And I self-educated on this, and my mind was blown, because at the end of that 12-month period, when I started to implement all these practices that were science and evidence-backed for healing trauma at the core, I found myself completely healed and symptom-free. And not only did I end my suffering, but for the first time, I was able to tap into joy. It was like this glass ceiling was lifted on my life, where I saw the world from a completely different perspective. And the amount of love that I felt for myself and everyone around me, I honestly think that was the medicine that healed me. And it's a beautiful story of healing, but it all started with that connection of all of these physical and mental symptoms are related to my trauma. And then how do I heal myself from that?
That was the medicine that healed me, which was self. It was your own energy. That is what it feels when you feel that bliss, when you feel calm. That is when you are truly connected to self. When you feel joy, when you feel peace, that is literally your own energy. It isn't relying on anything outside of yourself, whether it's a medication, whether it's a food, whether it's exercise, whether it's love from somebody else. Those are external factors that feel good. They can enhance our lives, but ultimately, the key is exactly what you said. When you feel connected with yourself, that's when you start to heal. And that's really amazing. Truly amazing. And yeah, I know going back with all of those challenges from childhood, your 20s, marriage, stressful job, the tools that you have in your tool belt, there's no price, right?
Yes.
You taught yourself that. Now you can show other people. They don't have to reinvent the wheel. Now their path might be different, right? Because we're different people. But the forum, you were talking about the forum. First of all, I would like to say your doctor did a great thing for you. She didn't allow her ego to get in the way. She said, you know what? I've tried everything. She went through her flowchart checkbox flow like they're taught in medical school, right?
Yes.
Scientists, that's what we do. And finally said, I don't know what else to do, but took the efforts in suggesting check out this other resource. And that helped to connect you to other resources that got you on your healing journey. Those forums do have a lot of information. Sometimes medical professionals that either had their own health condition or not will participate in those health forums. TikTok, whatever, there's doctors out there that are talking about new ways of approaching healing. I don't agree with a lot of stuff with the functional medicine because that, and this is my opinion, seems to be a trade-off for a supplement from a pharmaceutical drug. Like, I feel like that's still a crutch and doesn't necessarily deal with addressing the root issue.
Yeah.
With there, and I will back you up. I've done research too, and I will attest to what Diana is saying. She goes down the rabbit holes because she shared some of the books that she's read, and she has an immense amount of educational experience based on seeking that out. And I think that is amazing. So you're an expert in that, absolutely. With that healing journey is, from my own research, trauma seems to be the predominant root issue with all illnesses, whether
Yes.
it's mental health or physiological health, because they're all connected.
Yes.
The mind body, right? We have an imbalance in the mind. Now we make maybe the wrong choices with food or daily routine. It's all about energy, who we hang out with, the type of job that we take on, and how we allow it to impact us.
Yes.
But the other part is it can go back and forth. So if we eat the wrong foods, that can affect the mind.
Mm-hmm.
Gut brain axis. And it's like, what came first, the chicken or the egg? Is it the mind first and then the gut, or could it be the other way around?
Yes.
Flexibility, it goes back and forth. I can't emphasize this enough, is that we have had 50 million people in the US, this is 2022 data, have struggled with some form of mental health. 35 million of that number is related to drug addiction and suicide. That's a huge percentage. And that's continuing to rise. We know that mental health can go to those areas, suicide, drug addiction, but also all of these health issues. We put so much energy and research into cancer research, for example, in genomics, which I have my opinion on that. You can probably read my mind. Why aren't we putting this into mental health as a preventative aspect of that could actually prevent cancer, neurological disease, immunological disease, gut health, right? If we focused on how can we better address the mental health area on our planet.
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on this too. I think that the sentiment, the mental model of teaching people to be their own healer, which really is the antidote to this crisis, isn't in line with a capitalist agenda. We know that. And it's so beautiful, again, how the universe shows up for us. And oh, by the way, all we do is take from this planet. But all of the tools, all of the medicines, all of the answers are right here in Mother Earth and in the stars and in this beautiful galaxy that we engage with. And I honestly think that it's a spiritual crisis on some level. And it's whatever spirituality means to you. But if we start awakening, and it's happening, it's all around us. If we start awakening to the lies that we've been told, and we start to see the truth that we're all one and that God is love, then we start to disentangle ourselves and remove ourselves from so many aspects of the system that we engage with on a daily basis that make a lot of money for our government, right? We're taught from a very young age that our self-worth isn't God-given. It's not our birthright. It's not something that we come into the world with. It's something that we have to earn by performing and being a contributing member of a capitalistic society. And again, I don't want to vilify capitalism. I always think there's a gray area and there's healthy amounts of capitalism. But I think that's where the sickness starts. The sickness starts in this lack of self-worth, which is a spiritual problem, right? And what happens is now all of a sudden we're going outside of ourselves to find that self-worth, to validate our own existence in every single category of our lives. And we could talk about everything. We can talk about the average credit card debt that an American has and what that looks like and how that connects to spiritual health. We could talk about this trend around faith and faith traditions and how millennials and then younger generations too are rejecting spirituality. However, I think there's also this kind of counter movement happening where it's growing in certain respects. So I think it's really interesting. But people not growing up with that sense of community that comes from faith traditions that can be really powerful. So we've thrown out the baby with the bathwater, so to speak. And going back again to spiritual health and having that be the cornerstone where all other aspects of our health stem from, it starts with, I believe, and this is what's been true to me, is that relationship with the divine, which is the relationship with love. And this is a conversation that I never would have even engaged with or considered when I was in that state of victimhood and deep levels of trauma and chronic stress. I just wanted a silver bullet. I just wanted it to go away. I was so deeply indoctrinated to this idea of fast medicine. Give me a pill, give me a shot, give me whatever it is so that I don't feel so sick. And when you keep asking why and you get curious around it, you get to this point where you're able to identify trauma, and you're able to go even deeper than that. And you're able to see that actually the trauma is a gift, because the trauma and the suffering are catalyst, right? That the universe is throwing at you in order to get you to wake up, to love, and to come back to love, and to go back to that relationship with self, and to realize the only thing that you can do is engage the knowing, engage that inner wisdom, that inner healer. And believe me, it was such a circuitous route for me to get to where I am today. I went from taking SSRIs every day and drinking alcohol and numbing and just ignoring all of those calls, right? The call to the adventure, the signals that the universe was throwing at me to seek a better life. And I ignored that for so long. I'm talking 36 years. And then thankfully, I started opening up and being open-hearted and open-minded. And when I started being open-hearted and open-minded, that's when people and experiences and resources and things started coming to me, because I was inviting them, because I was open to it. And I'm so grateful that I was able to engage in this, what I now call this healing heuristic, which is another way to say this science and evidence-backed workflow that healed my trauma at the core. And in so doing, I found not only all of my medicines that I now engage with on a daily basis, if not an hourly or by the minute basis, even just how I breathe now is different. It also helped me to cultivate that inner healer. And I know now that's what I can always come back to. That's the most important relationship.
I love this. You covered a lot of ground, and I would like to expand on some of your thoughts and then go into the next section. You mentioned that trauma was a gift. It was a catalyst that woke you up. We see people waking up, and what we mean by that, what is waking up? We don't mean like you wake up in the morning, right, from sleep. Meaning you wake up and you remember who you truly are. Your sovereign self, not owned by X, Y, and Z persons, places, or things, but literally your own sovereign soul. There's a huge challenge, especially if you're in the media section. You're hearing all this noise, all of these dualistic statements, them versus us. The easiest way to conquer is through dividing. In that, it's been happening for decades, but we've seen that in our face since right before COVID, actually probably a few years before COVID, and then it amplified at that point. Even though people are actually maybe even addressing their trauma and healing from their trauma, they're being re-traumatized every day by these distractions, this lower vibrational energy, words of constant conflict, right? External conflict. We do have tools that we can utilize to maintain meditation, for example, researching what is particularly causing the issues for people on the individual level, turn off the social media. Also take it with a grain of salt. There's certainly a lot of education out there, but using discernment's important. How you use discernment is being able to tune into how it feels when you hear it. Just like how you eat that food, how does it make your body feel? How you are around certain people, how that makes you feel. The things that you hear, whether it's through the radio, whether it's on the computer, whether it's on your TV, or how people are speaking around you, how is it making you feel? If you can take that time away from that and then tune into, that's going to give you an answer. And it sounds like you came up with those, which I think is amazing. Curiosity is key. That keeps it open to everybody, no matter what you feel, no matter what you believe. Everybody's welcome to that table. That we need more of that. That's a childlike energy. And when people are in that childlike energy, they feel safe. They feel joyous. And that creates community. Is that playfulness and that innocence that creates that community. You were talking about health and different aspects and how you were going with trauma and all of that and how it opened up things for you. And the capitalism, and here's where I'm going to go with that. It would be a great service to anybody in any business, whether you're at governmental level, whether you're at private sector, because they're all connected, let's be real, right? It's money going in one area into the other. I've seen it personally. The health of people directly impacts our economy.
Yeah.
It's energy. So when people are unhealthy and stressed out, our crime rate goes up, right?
Yes.
And it impacts our economy. And now we have job loss. And it's just this vicious cycle. If we put our true energy and money into a healthcare that makes sense for people to truly help them heal, identify the root issues, that is going to lower the crime rate. It is going to stabilize the economy.
Yes.
As long as we're caught up into the loop that it is right now, which is pure insanity, because clearly our health is continually declining. So it's the definition of insanity. They're doing the same thing over and over again. They might be light things, but in essence, it's the same thing. Until we actually change that, where there's change maker people like yourself and others who truly are coming from a heart space and connected to God directly with source versus external, there's going to be challenges with that. You also said something about religion, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, when we rely on a religion, doesn't matter what it is, we're now relying on an interpretation within that. And I'm not saying don't go to church or anything like that, but that some churches, there's an interpretation of what's in the Bible or any of their books that they rely on, because there's other religions that have other books, documents. Their interpretation, the people that are at that congregation, that church, are relying on that pastor or that leader in the church and some of the things that they do, and they have to tithe, pay money, and all of these things. I think the community is great, but the thing that seems to get lost is that direct connection to the divine.
Yes.
And also the fear of God.
Yes.
God, this is my experience. When you're truly connected, there is no fear. In fact, the only thing to fear is fear itself. And when you feel that connection with God within yourself, that fear dissolves. There's no place for it. And that is going to directly affect your health. So thank you for touching on all of these things. I just wanted to highlight them, and people can take that if it resonates. If it doesn't.
Yeah. And really quickly before we move on,
Yeah.
say that there's a beautiful book by Thomas More, who I really admire. that is called A Religion of One's Own. And he touches on this or explores this trend, right? That has been really popular since really the beginning of time, but most prominently since the death of Jesus Christ, around outsourcing our spirituality, relinquishing our power and our sovereignty around our relationship to God to someone else, be it a preacher or a belief system or a line of teaching or a cult or whatever it is, and adopting whatever they're telling us is truth instead of allowing ourselves the space to explore it on our own and find our own relationship to God and our own belief system that feels authentic to us. There's a school of thought around the creator and how our experience is actually enriching. This is co-creation. Our lived experience on earth as a human is actually being lived by the divine, and we're co-creating this together and we're learning together and we're equals. And I love this idea because if God is love and we're learning over time with these experiences, maybe it's through a formal religion or a formal faith tradition, maybe it's through meditation, maybe it's through our relationship with nature, whatever it is, we are learning how to come back to love. And that should be the message that all of these religions offer. It should be a message of you are your own God. You are a fractal of the divine. You don't actually need us, but we're here for you, but you don't actually need us. And that's not the historical narrative. It's just not. It's been one of fear and control. And I always think about Jesus looking down on us and just laughing at what a mess we've made of his messages. We never should have gotten in bed with politicians and politics. That was one of the many mistakes that certainly Christianity made and have caused a lot of trauma as a result of that. Religion is really hard. No religion is perfect. But I think that at the core, the true message has been lost. And what's been happening as a result of that is, of course, the demise of these institutions, because lies can never be sustainable. You can never sustain a lie. And so it's going to be interesting to see how formal religion shifts as people's consciousness level continues to increase.
Absolutely. And our health mirrors our consciousness level. Words have frequency. The words we use to ourselves, towards other people, have an impact. How we say them, specific choice words that we use to describe others, have an impact. And when it has an impact on ourselves, it also has an impact on other people and vice versa. And I think things are really amplified today. Your point, trauma is a catalyst. A lot of people right now have been traumatized for many years, but there's been a larger concentration bolus dose where it's not as subtle these days, the recent times. It is just shifting people into waking up spiritually, into starting to be curious and investigate, into looking into things in their own lives, in their own relationships. It will result in something very beautiful and better.
Agree.
In the near future, actually, I feel.
Yes.
Reflecting back on, shifting gears a little bit, on going into the science-backed alternative approaches that you inferred earlier. Can you walk us through some of those things that you tried out and which worked better than others for yourself?
Sure. And I'll offer some context before I get into the specific modalities and exercises, because I think this is really important. And it's also why I built my company and started this venture. I think what happens oftentimes with people in terms of their kind of psychological state or their customer journey is there's a growing awareness that starts around trauma and childhood wounds and things that happened that haven't been properly addressed. And then from there, it's a big question mark of how to actually go about healing their trauma. And it's very common for someone to go from this awareness state to complete overwhelm and analysis paralysis. Because, oh, by the way, we haven't done a great job as a society of destigmatizing. It is such a spiritual experience too. It is a spiritual experience because what it is, it's a process of revelation. It's a process of discovery. It's a process of excavation. And you have to honor the process. You have to honor the process if you want to actually get to a point of sustained optimal health. You can try a thing and really feel relief, but there's a good chance that you will relapse if you don't honor the process. And so this workflow is really important. And for me, for what it's worth, and this very much inspired Capert, it started with a process of inquiry and education. The process of inquiry is important because it grows awareness around all the influences on your holistic health. And it's a psychology-backed process of inquiry where you start to answer questions around all of the aspects of your life, everything from what's the very first thing that you think of in the morning when your alarm goes off, and how do you spend that next 10 minutes, or even how do you wake up, right? Alarms are pretty jarring. Ideally, we wouldn't be waking up to an alarm. That's not the best way to start the day, a really loud buzzing noise. So anyway, that's just one example of this process of inquiry that we lead you on to grow the awareness around how these micro practices and micro rituals in our life can lead up to the reversal of a lot of these trauma-related health conditions. And for me, what that looked like, to finally answer your question, thank you for being patient. What that looked like for me was very much 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And so in so doing, I was making progress. And what I realized in this process, I realized 2 things. One was the process is so incredibly flawed, right? People with trauma have nowhere to turn. There's really nowhere to turn. They go to online forums, they go to people that they trust, they go to ChatGPT, and yet they're left with way too many options. And so they're going to waste a ton of money, they're going to waste a ton of time, they're going to be really frustrated. And that is a huge problem. And that was exactly me. So the good news is that I've tried all the things. So if your audience ever has a question of, have you tried this? I will probably say yes. And that includes getting on a plane, flying to Peru, doing ayahuasca, pretty crazy out there things that I own and that I don't regret, but I would never, ever suggest to people or endorse. So where my healing journey started and my relationship with naturopathic practices and alternative practices was actually with yoga. And my relationship with yoga runs so incredibly deep. And I think what's important to note is that I started to engage with this practice when I was very sick, in the head, in the body, and in the soul, very sick. And I started my relationship with yoga by going to the most westernized version of this practice that you could engage with. But I'm still so grateful. I'm not going to name it, but it's a nationally recognized chain of yoga studios that focus a lot on the physical body, the workout, the sweat. And it does a good job for that. It doesn't do as good of a job for honoring the actual ethos of a yogic practice and the yogic tradition. And what I love about my training in Bhakti, which is a practice of gratitude and devotion, is people forget that yoga is prayer. Yoga is over 2,500 years old, and it started as simply a meditative practice. Yoga, union with the divine. And they only came up with the physical postures and the physical practice 200 years ago, something like that, when it was first developed for young boys who were fidgety and couldn't sit still as a way to release energy and be able to meditate. I digress a little bit, but that to say, I was engaging with yoga in such a different way. I was literally going to yoga and then putting down in this app that I had how many calories I thought I burned and like doing extra push-ups in the practice. And it was very different from what my practice looks like today, but I'm still grateful for it because it did plant the seeds, and that's part of the process, right? But what I didn't realize was how, when I was practicing, is how yoga was working on me and slowly revealing how sick I was to me. One of the anecdotes that I can read out on, and this also shows you how anxious I was. When I would go to yoga, I would never be able to stay for Shavasana. I would always leave the class before Shavasana.
It's like the best part.
It is the most important pose. It is the integration phase. It's when you alchemize all of the work, the physical work that you just did, all of the purging that you just did of that stress. And you connect to the divine. You're supposed to enter a meditative state. I was so dysregulated and worried about getting on to the next thing, whatever next thing I had on my very packed schedule. I don't think we would be friends back in the day, Kristen. I was so uptight.
No, we probably would have, because I was too.
Really? Really? I love it. Yeah. No, 1.0 was very troubled, but I never stayed for Shavasana because I couldn't sit still. I was so traumatized. But anyway, sorry?
Can I ask you a question really quick?
Yeah.
When you were doing the yoga poses, because I've done this, were you worried about, oh gosh, I have to hold this pose for how long? And at least myself, I would go, when are we getting to the next thing? I just wanted to rush through it. Did you ever feel that way?
That, and after I was engaging with this chain of yoga studios, because I was so type A and a hypervigilant performer, I actually started doing Bikram, which is really good for people with OCD and control issues. It's like the yoga for people that want to continue to live in fear. No offense to anyone that's listening and loves Bikram, but it was really bad for me because the way that the practice is, especially just like the little things, like the fact that you're facing a mirror the entire time and you're in a bathing suit.
What?
Yes, the room is 104 degrees. People are working out in essentially bathing suits or like tiny bikini, teeny tiny little shorts, and you're staring at your body the whole time. And the messaging from the instructor is hyper focused on perfection of poses and postures. And you're not allowed to leave the room. You're only allowed to take water when I tell you to. It's so regimented. Again, I hope I'm not offending people by expressing my disdain for this particular lineage of yoga. There's also a lot of controversy around the creepiness of the instructor, or the founder. But anyway, yes, to all of your questions, yes, it was really hard for me, but it started to reveal what's so beautiful is how the universe works, and the fact that in recognizing that I couldn't stay for Shavasana, and this was after 10 years of practicing yoga, I realized, oh, there's actually something terribly wrong here. So I started to practice much differently. And that's when the magic started to happen. Tapping into that meditative practice, connecting to my higher self and with the divine. And that was such a powerful modality for me. And then what I started to do was I started to engage with trauma-informed yoga practices, which are really powerful. So Kundalini yoga is one of them, but also this idea of holding, it's called TRE, but it's a process of holding poses long enough to start to shake. And in shaking, you're actually releasing tension.
Absolutely.
So really powerful modality for me. And it was so powerful, in fact, that there were so many times, Kristen, where I did such an intense trauma-informed yoga practice that I would sob at the end of a practice, just sob. I was releasing trauma. I was releasing tension, and it would come out emotionally, which is really beautiful. The next thing that I did that was really powerful, but it is interesting, powerful in a really subtle way, was body work. I cannot stress enough the importance of body work and the fact that we store these toxic stress hormones. And you can speak more to this and the science of this in our fascia, in our muscles, in our bloodstream, like it's all there. And deep tissue and trauma-informed hands-on assistance is such a powerful way to release stored trauma. It's such a powerful somatic release. And I would cry at the end of a lot of really intense body work sessions too. You felt things being released. And again, I just want to cite that I'm really blessed to be able to afford things like this. These are expensive modalities that a lot of people can't afford. So that was another powerful thing for me. And then I'll quickly just go through, because I've been talking for a very long time. So I'll just quickly go through the other modalities that were the most transformational, although every single one of them gave me a little something. Psychedelics, psychedelic medicine in a therapeutic, safe, intentional container was incredibly powerful for me. And why? I want to explain the why. Psychedelics are not for everyone. And they were right for me because I was so in a state of imprisonment by my own ego and my own victimhood and my own OCD behavior that I was stuck in a really toxic reality. And I know now that's a reality that I absolutely created for myself. It wasn't actually reality. Reality is love. Actually, who am I to say what reality is? For me, what feels authentic to me is a place of love, true love, unconditional love for myself and everyone else. And I was so very much on the polar opposite end of that. And I had very intense issues with fear and control. When you've been violated, you often default to a state of fear and control and hypervigilance and all of the things. And I needed a powerful modality that forced me to truly let go of fear, of control, in order to heal myself. And that's what psychedelics did for me. I died a very intense ego death, and I can explain what that looked like for me. But it was the medicine that I needed at that time in order to tap into the truth of reality and altered states of consciousness, which a lot of people can get through meditation and holotropic breath work. But I had a huge roadblock in front of me, which was you're going to fear and control everything in your life. And I was not going to be able to move past that without some kind of external stimulus that removed all of that for me. And so that was another huge, very powerful modality. And lastly, I'm in nature and immersion in nature, the quiet of nature, long periods of solitude and reflection in nature was so incredibly beautiful and transformative for me.
Wow. This is really amazing. Going back to the meditation, I do know, especially they talked about the people who are veterans. There's a bunch of different studies. I'll highlight a few. I do transcendental meditation.
Mm.
I tried all forms. I tried everything. And I have an active mind. And when I was going through the thick of trying to heal, awakening, it was like a squirrel would come into the room. And then I would beat myself up because I wouldn't stay in this meditative state.
Oh, yeah.
I do transcendental meditation, and it's good for people who have the active minds
Mm.
and focus on the one word mantra. You transcend then, the squirrel comes back in the room, the thought comes in the mind, and that's okay because that's part of the meditative process. And sometimes body will even shake, to your point, releasing energy that needs to be moved out. So that might be a tool. But to get there, sometimes this process, which you've beautifully laid out, yoga, whatever type of yoga, helps to move energy out of the physical body. And at the end, the savasana is what I look forward to. I transcend. Then if you still feel a little agitated, you can do pranayama, which is breathing, right? Where you breathe in one nostril out of that side and then you plug the other side and you alternate. What that does is it regulates the nervous system. And then that kind of sets the tone to go into a meditative state. So some people do engage in that, like the breath work and physical body. And most people that are experiencing inflammation or pain, there are blocks in their body that are storing that trauma or that whatever it is, the stress. And your body is made of energy and it in water, obviously, which is another form of an element. And it's supposed to move that energy out of your body continuously so you can regenerate, bring in new, push out old, right? Just like your blood. If there's an area that blocks that movement, that's where you start to usually experience pain or inflammation or headache or whatever it is in the body. So those three things that you talked about with yoga, you talked about breath work, meditation, there's a way of moving energy out of the body, stabilizing the nervous system, and then connecting with self. When we transcend, that is where we heal.
Yes.
For example, if you meditate, if you go to sound therapy, because you can also transcend with certain types of sound therapy, when you come out of it and you're like, I don't remember bits and pieces, I don't remember certain parts of the transcendence, that is where there's no thought, that's when you're fully connected to self. And that space is where you're healing your body. And it sounds like utilizing these different tools, use the plant medicine so you could at least get to the point where you could start to connect with self. So you could heal. I'm going to repeat back and you correct me. Plant medicine isn't the healing. It isn't the mechanism that heals, but it's the mechanism that catalyzes and allows that person to get to the space where they can meditate.
Yes.
And transcend.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And I'm fascinated by the science behind these psychedelic compounds. And it's so funny, the hubris of the scientific field. And I get it, right? We want the answer. We want to know. But I think we're dealing with technologies that are way more sophisticated than we even have the capacity to understand. Right now, we're focused on the serotonergic effects of the psychedelic compounds and the fact that, it releases happy chemicals, and that's why we enter these different states. I think it's way more complex than that. I think that it's tapping into frequencies. I think it's shutting off the monkey mind, and in so doing, allow us to experience potentially true reality, right? We think that these compounds create this experience. And I am interested and curious about this idea of potentially it just removing the roadblock. It just removing this conception that we have of the hologram in which we live in order to see what's really out there. And that might sound really crazy to people. It probably resonates with people that have had a psychedelic experience. But I also think that in meditation and a lot of other healing modalities, like for instance, sweat lodges, I've had or been able to tap into altered states. It's all a process of actually seeing, I think, what's out there, what's really out there versus the frequency at which we operate right now in this world.
I agree with you. There's other things we don't completely understand. I don't understand the plant medicine area. I've asked a lot of questions. I'm a toxicologist. That's my background. But I do know that pharmaceuticals aren't working. Perhaps these could be tools potentially that get someone at least to a starting point where they can heal. Have you heard of anyone? Do any of these have addictive qualities? Have you heard about that? Do you know that's a concern with some?
Yeah. Each psychedelic, I want to start by saying that each psychedelic substance and molecule and compound reacts differently in the body for every single person. That's what's also magical about them. And some of them, some specific compounds can have psychologically addictive properties. So you should tread really lightly. I'm of the mindset where I feel like these plants really are sacred and you have to honor them. You have to honor them and engage with them in a certain way. When in America, we've taught them more is more. And that's where it's a slippery slope. Because if you are able to experience a state of euphoria, potentially for the first time in your entire life, and tap into this frequency, this energetic field of unconditional love, which is what I experienced for the first time with a psychedelic immersion, then that in itself can become a little bit addictive. Like I want to live in bliss every single day instead of creating my own bliss. Now that I know there's this external tool that can help me to reach a blissed out state, I can once again, average American, be lazy and disempowered and default to relinquishing my own power over to this stimulant, if you will. And I think that can be really problematic. So anyone that's listening that has struggled with addiction or works with people that are addicts, those are deep neural pathways in the brain that need to be treated really lightly. And I would suggest starting with iboga and studying iboga as a plant medicine that has been proven to work for people struggling with addiction, specifically before engaging with any other plants. That being said, there's no physical addictive properties to plant-based psychedelics. In fact, there's been tons of psilocybin studies, mushroom studies with people with active heroin addiction and things like that, where it's actually helped them tremendously to wean off of these really toxic substances that they're engaging with and to mitigate cravings and things like that. But again, you have to tread lightly. You have to be really responsible. And they're also not for everyone.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying that. Just like anything in excess is bad for you. Too much water, not enough water, even meditation. I know people who meditate, and meditation is a very good thing, but I know people who meditate most of the day, multiple days a week. And yes, they're like in a different zone, almost like a twilight zone. If you have to use a descriptor,
yes,
be dangerous because they're not grounded. I will say meditating on a regular basis, a couple times a day, 20 to 30 minutes is really good because it helps you access your internal intelligence so much faster. Like you're connected. But if you're too much in the etheric, now the grounding has been affected. So the practical aspects of your daily life are going to feel it, right? Just to your...
Yeah. Yes. And that's where integration is important too, right? I really believe that we were put on this planet to have a human experience and engage in this very flawed, chaotic, dynamic human experience, and to be able to do that versus escape it. Exactly. And it's so great to be able to have these tools where we can come back to ourselves, we can come back to the divine, but only for so long. We need to be able to function in this world.
Yeah. So I want to just ask you a brief question on what full recovery felt like for you. How long did it take for you to get there? And then we'll jump into talking about your startup company.
Sure. Yeah. So I mentioned going down the rabbit hole on trauma and the mind, body, spirit connection and self-educating a lot on what that means. And it led me everywhere. I started with very practical psychology-based tools. I read all the Peter Levine books, all the Besser van der Kolk books, all the Paul Conti books, all the Gabor Mate, list goes on and on. And then as I progressed, I was really interested in the spiritual element and the role that spirituality plays and energy and quantum physics plays and all of that. And I would say that it took me 12 months from the time that I really devoted myself in earnest to healing to enter a state of what I call remission, which is achieving a state of being symptom-free, sleeping through the night for the first time since I was in my early teens, sleeping through the night without the help of a serious sleep med that left me very groggy in the morning, including trazodone at one point. So really intense insomnia, sleeping through the night, waking up, feeling like $1,000,000, getting to a point where I could sit by myself quietly in a room and tap into a altered state of consciousness and feel divine energy, feel like I was being enveloped by my spirit guides in those experiences, and also being able to enter these containers with a completely regulated nervous system for the first time ever, feeling for the first time ever a complete sense of serenity and peace and safety, which was such a beautiful gift. And also having all of my digestive symptoms completely disappear. So the acute pain that I was feeling in my lower abdomen was gone. My bloating was gone. My constipation was gone. My bathroom issues were gone. Everything was gone. And it was incredible. It was incredible because I felt like I felt there had been this revelation that not only was my own healer, as we discussed, but also there were specific rituals and practices that I could engage with to keep me well forever, that could sustain my health forever. And I had all of the knowledge that I needed. That being said, healing is a lifelong endeavor, right? So there are things that pop up and are popping up now in my life. I'm 42 years old. I'm a female. I'm going through hormone changes. So now I'm experiencing this shift and I'm like, oh, now I need to add more medicines to my medicine cabinet as I go through this transition, this really sacred, beautiful transition that we don't honor in the Western world, unfortunately. But yeah, I got to a point where not only were all of these happening, these things, positive things happening, positive trends around sleep, digestion and inflammation, anxiety reduction. But as I mentioned earlier, I was able to live in joy and gratitude and bliss for the first time ever. So it was so much more than just, I didn't have these health challenges. It was, I'm able to finally live my birthright. I'm finally able to live in this human body in this 3D world, having this human experience and be grateful for it and be grateful for all of my trauma and look at my parents and look at my ex-husband and look at all the people that caused me such distress and say, thank you. Thank you so much for nudging me in the direction that I needed to go, that I was being called to go in order to get myself well in mind, body, spirit.
It was interesting you mentioned you were on a trazodone, which is a SSRI. A lot of people don't realize this, but one of the potential side effects is what we call serotonin syndrome, which can mimic being on a CNS stimulant. I've seen a couple of cases where this can be when a person is taking a combination of an SSRI and a pain medication like tramadol, for example, or a high level for them. because there's not a one size fits all approach. If there should not be a one size fits all approach, but there tends to be with medication, is some of the signs you might see would be dilated pupils, elevated pulse, elevated blood pressure, almost like you're drinking caffeine, right? Because
Yeah.
it's stimulatory effect. So it's interesting that they would give someone that to deal with anxiety, but it could potentially cause the anxiety.
Yep. Yeah. Don't get me started on how quickly people write scripts and
Yeah.
just the field of pharmacology in general. It's very flawed.
I just wanted to mention that. And I am a toxicologist, so I do see that. You talked about remission. You used the word remission. I'm in remission. And then you did mention that your symptoms were completely gone. But when I look at the definition of remission, and according to Merriam-Webster, right, it infers that this is a temporary state, temporary remission of symptoms. It's when a person remits, that's not really being clear, but it's somewhat ambiguous. It's not really clear to me when I'm looking at this, but the essence of this is it's temporary. Do you feel, and there's no right or wrong answer here, I want to know how you feel,
Right.
that when you feel like you're completely healed, is it remission? Or are we using the term because it is what is expected of us, society, versus saying, I got rid of it, it's gone? Because we know that we live in a dynamic world, right? There's no steady state here. Obviously, we're going to be susceptible to different changes in our physical body because we have energy changing around us.
Yes.
We could potentially have similar symptoms in the future. Does it mean it's the same thing? Or we may never know. So that's why I'm asking you this question, because I just want to know how you feel about it first.
I love this question. Yes, I love this question. And the English language is so limited. We don't have the right words to be able to describe all of these different states of existence, really. So maybe healed is a better word. However, I agree with the sentiment around the word remission and the fact that it might be temporary. And I'll tell you why. I have such deep respect for my system, the system of my health, mind, body, spirit. And I have such deep respect for the sensitivity of this system and the fact that it requires daily, if not hourly, if not minute to minute maintenance and support and adjustment and investment in order to keep myself operating at my most optimal state of well-being. And I don't want to infer that it's so sensitive that you're going to have one bad day and you're back to ground zero. But I will say that I know that if I revert back to the practices and the lifestyle and the influences and the habits that I was engaging with before I entered remission, that I will absolutely relapse and be back to where I was. My digestive disorder will come back. Something else will, I'm sure, flare up. I won't be able to sleep again. I will be experiencing symptoms of anxiety. Everything will return to where it was before if I don't treat the system of my health with an equal amount of respect. And so that's what I would say in response to that, is that it could absolutely be a temporary state if you go back to everything that you were engaging in terms of your lifestyle before you started on your healing journey. And that's why I have huge problems with these skinny shots that are coming out and these GLP-1s, not to digress, but with fast medicine, it's oftentimes incredibly hard to sustain that progress. You're not learning any of the tools and the medicines that you need to sustain your health. And oh, by the way, quick stat, the average person that has taken a GLP-1 gains back 48% of the body fat that they lost while on the drug, half of the body weight. And that's only data from the past year. Let's just wait. Let's just wait to see what happens. Not to mention the side effects and the long-term implications on the organs that
osteoporosis or bone
yeah.
death.
Yeah. So that's just the conditioning of the system. Let's be lazy and do all this work and then just throw it all out the window and expect our bodies to just keep going and be able to maintain. It doesn't work that way.
That's why with Ayurveda, we don't look at illness. We look at imbalance. So with the word remission isn't really used, we're rebalancing the state. So the body can go back out of balance. It's simple. So you left the startup, the VC-backed startups. You reflected on your journey. Amazing, by the way. And now you have your own company. So you drew off of all of this to start your own company, Catbird. Tell us what that company, first of all, what does the name mean? Give me a symbol behind that. And also, what is it? And where do you see it going?
Yes, absolutely. This is my passion project. So I can talk about this forever. And I love that there's such great synergies between the work that I'm doing and the work that you're doing. And I'm excited to explore that more in the future. Catbird, the name, was inspired by a mystical experience that I actually had in the Sacred Valley of Peru. And if anyone has yet to visit this incredibly beautiful place, I would highly recommend it. And I'm also one of those people that will tell you to skip Lima, go directly to Cusco. It's such a charming town, and just immerse yourself. I stayed at a beautiful retreat center there, and we can link it in the notes. It translates to sun and moon. And I was doing long periods of meditation and yoga and hikes and nature immersion and working with some healers out there. And I was in a deep meditation, and this beautiful, vibrant emerald green bird appeared to me. And it was fluttering around and making a very interesting, very distinct call. This was in meditation. This wasn't in real life. This was in meditation. And this word came to me, catbird. And I just filed it away and moved on. And when a meditative experience, these things come and go. And I was like, oh, that's really interesting. Okay. And all along, there had been kind of signs and messages from the universe telling me that I was going to start a company and that I was a connector. And my calling in this life was to be a connector, not only a connector of relationships, but a connector of all the things, healing modalities, resources, all of that. And I saw before me this matrix and a golden light connecting different people in my life. And it almost represented the golden lights. There were little circles, and it felt like it represented the souls that I had interacted with on this planet and how I was going to connect so many of them through the work that I was called to do. And so that was the very beginning. Those were the seeds that were planted in me around this project that I'm working on now. And then I came back from that trip and was integrating, and just at that point was enrolled in Stanford's executive business program and learning a ton and being really inspired. And as part of that program was incubating this project. And I didn't know what it was called yet, but I kept on stumbling across this word catbird. I read a book called Learning to Pray, which I also would highly recommend. I loved it. And there was an anecdote about a catbird that got into this chapel where the author was praying. And then I came across a jewelry company that was named Catbird. And there were all these little signs that Catbird was the name of this company. And so I started to dive into catbird, and I was like, what is this? Is this even a bird? And yes, it's an actual type of bird that is very rare, and it lives in the jungles of Australia and I think New Zealand, and it is said to have mystical healing properties. It's a very magical bird. So that's why I named the company Catbird. And so that's a little bit about the name. And the company is a revolutionary new care model that will change the way that the world heals from trauma. We have been doing this so wrong. We have been turning to psychiatric medications and surgical intervention and patented psychological practices that can move the needle for some people, but clearly aren't working for the masses. Over 200 million Americans are currently suffering from a trauma-related condition, a health, physical or mental condition that is rooted in trauma. And yet, when people think of trauma, they think of talk therapy. And that is problematic for a few different reasons. One is oftentimes there's a huge quality control issue with talk therapy. A lot of therapists actually aren't trauma informed. They don't understand that by revisiting certain narratives and thought loops over and over again, you're actually reinforcing and strengthening those neural pathways around trauma and enforcing those feelings of victimhood, which are part of the healing process, but also can keep a lot of people very stuck. And then the field of psychology also oftentimes, not every time, but oftentimes fails to acknowledge the multidisciplinary effects of trauma. Trauma doesn't just live in the brain. Trauma affects every aspect of your health. We know this now. So traditional talk therapy can do very little to assist in that process of purging, releasing, acknowledging trauma on a cellular level. And that's what we're solving for currently, is tackling trauma from a completely 360-degree comprehensive standpoint that is science and evidence backed. And I'm really excited about the progress that our clients are making and the work that we're doing and this very unique approach that we have to healing trauma that anyone can access. So yes, it's free to try. And that's a little bit about Catbird, and we can talk more about it if you'd like.
Oh, kudos to you. I love that. And we need more of this in the world. I think as things shift over the next few years, we're going to see evolution in healthcare. People are just tired of what's not working. What other gaps do you see? Let's just talk about insurance or any of that. Would you want to touch on some of those other areas that you feel could be addressed with a different type of healthcare system?
Sure. As it pertains to Catbird and the work that we're doing, innovating intentionally outside of the healthcare system, meaning we're not a HIPAA-covered entity, and that allows us to operate truly collaboratively across disciplines, which is what is required for healing trauma. Think about it today. If you have a trauma-related symptom or are struggling with a mental health challenge rooted in trauma, you go see your psychotherapist and they're over here in this silo, and then you go see your physician for some kind of comorbidity issue, which often happens. Maybe it's insomnia or inflammation or autoimmune disease or even cancer, they're saying now. And your physician gives their assessment and they're over here. And then you go see your naturopathic doctor over here. Maybe it's an acupuncturist, and they work with you and have you on a different protocol, and that's over here. And no one's collaborating and no one's sharing information. And no one understands the status quo of your health. And so therefore they can't help you. And I think what's interesting about that is that it's a critical piece of the journey to have that collaborative care model, because again, we're learning over time to become our own healer. when you're in acute states of distress around these, that comes with these health conditions, and we've been so disempowered by the system, you're not working on becoming your own healer out the gates. You're working on symptom mitigation. You're working on, there's this thing that's going on in my life that is deeply impacting my quality of life, and I want it to go away. And that compassionate care delivery system is very important for people that, again, are in states of chronic stress. What we work to do, and it's a hybrid model between these compassionate humans and this really innovative technology system that we're building as well, is working over time to get the training wheels off and for you to take the reins back on your health. And as Mark Hyman says, become the CEO of your own health so that you can sustain whatever progress you've made for a lifetime. And so we applied this hybrid AI and human care model to guide you on the system, this process of inquiry and awareness and education, and then match you with these specialists that are handpicked for you based on your symptoms and your goals, and help to monitor and track your progress as you progress. So I'm really excited about it. I'm really excited to work with really highly experienced, educated practitioners like yourself and Ayurveda, and bring in all of these beautiful methodologies and healing modalities to our user base and help them to get well faster, cheaper, more effectively, more sustainably, all of the things.
Or efficiency, workflow. So it sounds like education is really the focal point of CAPBIRD. Or if you had, just based on expanding out what your last answer was to the question, if people were struggling with chronic illness and they wanted to know what are my next steps, would education be the first stop?
Yes, I cannot discount the importance of the self-empowerment piece through education and through awareness. This is how you start to understand all the flaws in the system. You can't really navigate your own healing journey or engage in a healing journey unless you understand the power that you have and tap into that intuition and that knowing. It's really important. And then what we do from there is we offer this really dynamic, thoughtful, science-backed action plan, which we call your healing journey, to you. And you can engage with it. It listens, it responds, it changes, it evolves, it gets to know you. And really the end goal is to create a source for yourself on your holistic health. So being able to tap a digital assistant, a pocket companion that lives with you, that knows everything about your health and remembers everything about you and can help to optimize and personalize your healing journey for a lifetime.
Sounds extremely exciting and innovative. And so you're taking a lot of the new technology and bridging that into and identifying the gap and trying to help people in the here and now.
Thank you.
And at low cost. I think that's nice. So where can people find you?
Yes. So I would say in terms of social, our handle is at CATBIRD Club across the board, every social channel. CATBIRD is spelled CATBIRD and then CLUB. We're also on LinkedIn. Our URL is the same. It's www.catbirdclub.com. And we have a freemium experience that we hope to sustain for a very long time. But regardless, it's a very powerful quiz-style intake process, which again captures a comprehensive amount of holistic health data from you in order to counsel you and guide you on what we really feel is going on. So for people that are at the very beginning stages of their healing journey, maybe they've started to connect some dots, but they're also looking for a truly personalized experience with trauma-informed practitioners. We've built this technology model that pulls from the top trauma experts around the world. So it's almost like having 100 of the top trauma-informed practitioners in the room with you at once. And we help to assess your levels of trauma from both childhood and early adulthood. We also assess your levels of perceived stress. It's called a PSQ assessment, but helping to figure out, okay, where are you really in terms of your chronic stress levels? And then we continue with a holistic health assessment. So gathering a ton of information from you about all the influences on your health and how they may be impacting your health, and offering you actionable insights and resources to get well.
It's awesome. And I will be linking all of her socials, website information, and any studies you may or books that you referred to in the podcast listing, and also any of our social posts. Also, you should be able to find that. Diana, thank you so much for showing up honestly, in full authenticity, and just, you're such a light, for sharing your story, your wisdom about your company, and for doing the work that matters. So
Thank you,
grateful to have
Kristen.
here.
Back at you. I'm so grateful for this experience. I hope your listeners gained some insights.
They will.
Take care.
This conversation has been enlightening. From marketing executive to trauma healing entrepreneur, it shows how our biggest breakdowns can become our biggest breakthroughs, not just for ourselves, but for everyone around us. What brings to light for me with this story, which tends to happen with most folks that experience chronic illness, is that sometimes the most rebellious thing that we can do is actually listen to our bodies, face our trauma head on, and create space for healing that goes way beyond numbing the pain. Whether you're wrestling with chronic health issues of your own, starting to see trauma patterns emerge in your own life, Diana's work at Catbird represents something crucial that's happening right now, a shift towards treating the whole person, not just checking the box in a chart. And everyone listening, if this has stirred something up within you, pass it along to someone else that you may feel would benefit from this. Sometimes healing starts with just knowing you're not the only one going through this. Until next time, be gentle to yourselves. Please follow us on Instagram, Your Health is Wealth Podcast. The link to the website is found on the Instagram bio as well. On our website, we list the episodes, and there is an online form where you can share your feedback, ask questions, share input on future topics, and also contact us if you're interested in being featured on the podcast. Topic scope is related to health and wellness. Thank you very much for listening to our podcast today, and look forward to more.